This essay example, as well as thousands of others, is available in text format on our website for free and without registration. Simply Google Ivy Panda Free Essays.
Global warming is controversial. However, the documentary The Great Global Warming Swindle has made it even more debatable. The film was released in March 2004 in the United Kingdom and caused different opinions about the presented issue. Global warming critics supported the documentary, while different scientific organizations extensively criticized it. The film presents the idea that global warming can hardly be man-made, with carbon dioxide emissions having no relation to Earth's rising temperature. Instead, as the film posits, global warming is one of the defining moral and political courses of our age. According to the film, the main aim of the scientific organizations is to get funding for the research of this problem and attract additional attention to global warming, while in reality, the climate is changing regardless of human activities. While the world is intensely preoccupied with the theory of anthropogenic global warming, the Great Global Warming Swindle argues against this theory. Its main arguments are that the climate has constantly been changing and that some facts within the issue under consideration do not match the theory. On the one hand, the arguments presented in the film are convincing, while on the other hand, they are based on the out-of-date research, which makes the problem of the global warming still open to discussion. Film's key points. First, the documentary in question expresses the idea that carbon dioxide emissions are not related to global warming. Several scientists agree that humans cause the greenhouse effect. As stated by them, the most common cause of greenhouse effect is the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In this way, industrious society and the use of technologies are blamed for global warming. However, there exists an opposing view that human beings do not cause long-term global warming. The documentary supports this idea by stating that the Earth's climate is always changing. Expressing this point, the film gives several examples of how the climate of the Earth changed throughout the centuries. At this, carbon dioxide emissions were relatively low. Thus, the film mentions the Little Ice Age, which took place in the 14th century, the medieval warm period, the Holocene maximum, etc. These events date back to those times when humans hardly knew anything about environment-destructive technologies, which is why climate change is not connected with human influence. In addition, to prove they're right, the contributors to the film state that specific facts in human history do not match the theory of anthropogenic global warming. For instance, when the Industrial Revolution began in 1940, carbon dioxide emissions were higher than ever. According to the theory, the temperature of the Earth should have increased, however, it went down instead. This resulted in the assertion that human carbon dioxide is not what causes global warming. The fact that the film contributors are professors, researchers, and scientists makes their views convincing, which is why the attitude of several people toward the issue of global warming changed after the release of the movie. This, however, made the proponents of the opposite view look for the flaws in the film's ideas. Critique. The ideas regarding the causes of climate change presented in the film documentary are quite convincing. The strongest point of the film is that the arguments are logical. Thus, the film contributors clearly state their point of view: man-made global warming is senseless, support their opinion with evidence, no temperature rise when carbon dioxide emissions were high and no technology used when the global warming took place, and show where exactly the theory of anthropogenic global warming is erroneous. Some facts do not match the theory. At the same time, however, their arguments have a weak point. They are based on out-of-date research, the latest are from the 1950s, which creates limitations to their findings. It was named after the 1950s when technologies started developing rapidly, became more numerous, and even more destructive for the environment. This is why the argument presented in the documentary cannot be considered completely reliable. Conclusion. The documentary film The Great Global Warming Swindle altered some people's ideas about the issue of global warming or, to be more exact, its causes. This film presents the idea that carbon dioxide emissions do not cause the greenhouse effect and, thus, have no relation to industrial society and the use of technologies. The logical presentation of the argument and the credentials of the contributors to the film make this view convincing. At the same time, the out-of-date research on which these contributors rely does not allow their arguments to be considered fully valid. This is why the issue of global warming and its causes remains controversial. This essay on the Great Global Warming Swindle, Different Views on the Issue was written and submitted by a student just like you. The Ivy Panda Samples database hosts thousands of works similar to this one, on various subjects. Visit ivypanda.com to find what you are looking for, free of charge.